let me just kind of be upfront and transparent with you, because that's kind of the way I am. When I've given presentations before, it's always on stuff that I've kind of internalized, or I've just felt like intuitively. This stuff isn't like that for me. Like, I've had to kind of study this stuff on my own, so I'm still learning this stuff. And so my goal for this is to hopefully, like, by the time we leave, you'll be excited about this idea of deliberate practice and purposeful practice, and I'll whet your palate just enough to kind of get you excited to go out and kind of learn more about it and read up about it and start incorporating it into your own lives. So while we get started, these are the 4 things that I'm passionate about. So my family there, 3 kids. They're all adopted. I love my family. The other day I had to describe myself in 3 words, and I said husband, father, designer, in that order, which is like 6 words, but I didn't count the last 3. Next, baseball. I love baseball, played baseball here when I was growing up, and somehow became a Royals fan before I moved to Kansas City, which is really weird. But then I moved to Kansas City and it was like sealed. It was like done deal. I'm a Royals fan forever. And then when we moved back here, they actually got good, won a World Series, and now they're horrible again. But I'm like, I don't care. Like, I started liking them when they were horrible. I still like them now. Design. I'm passionate about design, and pizza. I had to add pizza. I used to just be like these 3, and then I was like, dude, you're totally passionate about pizza. I have a pizza box collection, actually. And this is news. This is brand new stuff, like happened in like last week. I'm going to be in the Texas State Fair Pizza Bake-Off. How cool is that? Like, my wife did all this research. Like, we just moved 7 months ago. My wife did all this research to find out like how she could get involved, or how our family could get involved in the state fair. And she's like, Todd, there's a pizza bake-off. You should do this. I'm like, well, I don't know. And then I thought about it. Okay, I'll do it. And then we look it up, and you had to like submit your name to like a lottery, and then they would pick out 16 people to be in this pizza bake-off, because it's like you go to the state fair with your ingredients, you bake your pizzas there with all the other contestants, and then they're judged. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll do it, but like, it's Texas. There's got to be more than 16 people that want to do this. But like, I got an email that said, hey, you're in. So that's exciting. Texas. We moved to Texas 7 months ago. And it was interesting because kind of looking at my career, looking at some other factors, on paper, maybe it didn't make sense to move. Let me just tell you, the product Hive community is awesome. I hope you appreciate like what you have in the community. And so me getting used to this community here, like when I moved back from Kansas City, it was like lunch UXs, I think, and we were meeting like around a conference table talking about a book that we'd read. Like that's kind of like where I remember it starting. That's where I got involved with it. And then it grew to Product Hive. And so I'm thinking moving to Dallas, well, Dallas is like a big city. It's going to have a great community. It doesn't have a great community. It feels cliquish. It doesn't feel as helpful as the like specifically the Slack stuff that you guys do. Yeah, so I really appreciate the Product Hive community, how open everybody is, how helpful everybody is, and you guys have a lot going for you. And then just like the tech scene here too, like if you do what we do, like this is a great place to be, and you can find a job at a number of places, right, around here. But here's the reason. This is Lehigh. We used to live in Lehigh. And this is where we live now, DeSoto. It's literally like 60-70% African American in DeSoto. And I don't know if you remember the picture of my family. My family's 60% African American too. So we wanted to kind of move to a place that was where our kids wouldn't be in the minority, but we would, so that one, they would feel less strange, and two, my wife and I would know how they feel in situations when they are the minority. And it's been like that. It's not been super easy, but like we're working through it, and we're kind of, it's like a transition period. It's way different than it is here, you guys. Way different. Like, does anybody have someone they know that lives in the Dallas area? Raise your hands. I'm guessing 80% of the people you know that live in Dallas live north of the river, like downtown Dallas north. Everybody that we told, like, oh, you're moving to Dallas? Here's the good communities. They were all north. So it's very similar to here, there, or north, right? You know what I mean. We live in DeSoto, which is on the southern edge of Dallas, right before you like get to the country. And so I have a great commute because all the jobs are north, right? All the people like us are north. So anyway, let's kind of get into this. I need to volunteer first. Somebody I don't know, because this can't like look like it's a setup. So if you don't know me, if this is your first introduction to me, I need a volunteer. Go. Okay, come on up. Sunglasses. How's your memory?
Pretty crap.
Pretty crap.
Yep.
All right. So, what's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew, good to meet you, Andrew.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Full stack developer.
Cool. Sorry.
No.
You can hear Andrew?
Can you hear me okay?
Okay.
I'll project.
Where do you work?
I'm freelance right now.
Oh, cool.
So, need a full stack developer.
Yeah, like hook up with him on the meetup after this. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of illustrate like a principle or like kind of an experiment, but it's just memory.
Okay.
So in the book Peak, which is written by Anders Ericsson, he's a researcher at Florida State, I think, and he studies expertise, and he wanted to know like what makes experts like experts. And one study that he had early on was in memorizing a string of numbers. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read a random string of numbers. I'm gonna start with 5 digits. And then you just repeat back to me that string of numbers. And really, this is just testing like your short-term memory. Okay? Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. And I should be doing this about at 1 second intervals, but I'm not timing it, so like give me a break. Okay, ready? 2, 6, 4, 1, 8.
2, 6, 4, 1, 8.
Great, let's do 6. 1, 1, 0, 3, 0, 8.
1, 1, 0, 3, 0, 8.
Awesome, 7. That's not a number, that's like how many we're doing. Okay. 0, 0, 4, 2, 4, 0, 7.
0, 0, 4, 2, 0, 4, 7?
Sorry, you mixed up the 4 and the 0. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Give him a hand. Andrew. And if you need some freelance work, look him up. Okay, so he got the 7 and stumbled, right? I'm pretty sure, Andrew, if we'd have gone back. So what they did is if he would have made that mistake, they'd have gone back to 5. Yeah, back to 5. So he went 2 steps back and then kept working up, okay? So the average is about 7 or 8 digits. That's like average for most people. And so they set up this study, and this man, Steve Falloon, comes in as the participant for the study. And the first day, he does about what Andrew did, only it was about an hour. Like they were working on this, right? And random digit after random string of numbers after random string of numbers, he's about 7 or 8. Maybe he gets 9 once, but not consistently at all. That's the first day. The second day was a little bit better, and he said it was probably because I knew what to expect now, and so I was a little more comfortable. Third day, no improvement. Fourth day, no improvement. By this time, Erickson and his colleague are starting to think like, okay, he's pretty much hit the natural ceiling. Like that's what all the research says as far as the capability of our short-term memories. That 7, 8, maybe 9, 10, maybe 11, but not for this guy. But by the 5th day, he had a breakthrough. So they started at 5, he did 5, then went to 6, did 6, went to 7, did 7, went to 8, missed it, back to 6, 7, 8, 9, missed 10, back to 8. All of a sudden he got up to 11, which was 2 better than he'd ever done. And they thought, I think we're onto something, because he broke through that natural barrier, okay? After 60 sessions, he was up to 20 digits. After 100 sessions, he was up to 40. 40 digits at that time was more than professional, I'm totally going to strip on this word, mnemonists, people that memorize stuff, okay, like professionally. I didn't know that was a thing. And so he was up to 40 digits. Like, think about that. They would read 40 consecutive numbers, just like I did with Andrew, and then he would repeat those 40 digits perfectly. After about a year and 200 sessions, he topped out at 82 digits. Okay? Just to give you an idea, that's 82 numbers. Read at 1-second intervals, repeated back perfectly. And they did this because he was constantly pushing himself. He was constantly working at the edge of where he was comfortable and just breaking past that, right? So this is a story that Anders Ericsson uses to introduce his book, and I just thought it was so impactful and it's so easy to get your mind around as an example that I wanted to start with it here. So the book kind of debunks this idea that there's this talent thing, in the sense that this man, Steve Falloon, he didn't have a special talent for memorizing. That was evident by the first few times that he tried it, right? Instead, Erickson's research kind of shows that the brain is incredibly adaptable. We can teach ourselves to do anything if we put our minds to it, essentially, right? And so what they found, and let me just read this quote. When experts exhibit their superior performance in public, their behavior looks so effortless and natural that we are tempted to attribute it to special talents. Think about the last child protege you saw on the piano. It's like, wow, that kid is amazing. That's like an awesome talent, right? Mozart, for example, had perfect pitch. I thought I knew what perfect pitch was, but I didn't really. The definition of perfect pitch is basically being able to hear any tone, any note, and know where that is being played, what note that is. I got middle C for you. I don't know what the others are called, right? I know the letters, but a couple octaves. Anyway, so perfect pitch happens naturally in about 1 out of 1,000 people. Some researchers got curious and said, well, what if we took some kids, ran them through some practice. Basically, they were playing chords. Gong, they'd play a chord, and then they would say, hey, that's this chord, okay? Dong, that's this chord. And then they would play some more, and the kids would have to say, oh, that's chord A, or that's chord B, or whatever it was, right? And so they did this for a year or so. I don't remember. I totally made up a year. They did this for the duration of the study. That's more accurate. And 24 out of the 24 participants developed perfect pitch. Mozart, who had perfect pitch, was this amazing musical protege. Looking back at it now, his dad did all of these deliberate practice kind of exercises with him when he was very, very little. And so he had been practicing in a way that was pushing his limits and his boundaries from the time he was very little. And so he developed these abilities. And so the special talents, okay, sorry. So I didn't finish, I totally stopped in the middle of the quote. You guys, I'm so scatterbrained. The last part of that quote was, we're tempted to attribute those things to special talents. However, the quote continues. When scientists began to measure the experts' supposedly superior powers, no general superiority was found. Okay, that's just to say, like your mom always said, you can be anything you want to if you just put your mind to it. Like, it's true. Now, there's caveats, like I'm not going to give Rudy Gobert a run for his money as the center for the Jazz. Like, that's just never, ever going to happen, no matter how hard I work, right? Like, there's some things where the physics involved or the biology involved kind of play a part, right? They looked at baseball players, since I'm a baseball guy, and they found that baseball players have a higher average than the general population of, is it 2010? Is that like better than 2020? Or is it 2010 vision is more common among professional baseball players than it is in the general public, right? And so there are things like that you're just kind of born with. But the ability to adapt your mind and to learn isn't one of them. Okay, so Malcolm Gladwell. I love Malcolm Gladwell. Does anybody in here listen to like his podcast, Revisionist History? Yes, it's awesome, isn't it? God. And I was listening on the way in, and I was just laughing at his radio spots, like his sponsor spots are hilarious. And so it's like, it's the only one that I don't like try to skip through because it's just funny. But he wrote this book, Outliers, kind of on the similar subject of like what makes the outliers, what makes the people that excel different. And he had read the research that we're sharing, that I'm sharing today with that Erickson did, and these people that study expertise, and said they've settled on what they believe is the magic number for true expertise, 10,000 hours. Who'd heard of that kind of general rule before, right? It got super popular, and this was why. And Malcolm Gladwell actually said, like, of all the things in that book, I'm still surprised that this is the thing that everybody remembers. So Anders Ericsson, remember the author of Peak, he kind of took issue with that a little bit, and he actually calls it out in his book and says, yeah, 10,000 hours is great, but it's not just practicing 10,000 hours. And we'll get into a little bit more about that in just a second. It's 10,000 hours of the right sort of practice. He talks about a study of chess players. Any chess players in the room? I'm totally not a chess player. Awesome. But after like reading all this stuff, I'm like, I could maybe be a chess player if I wanted to. So they studied chess players, and these players started out and put in 10,000 hours of practice, and it was their kind of option about how they wanted to do it. And what they found was the ones that some of them over that 10,000 hours remained at an intermediate level. Some of them became grandmasters, but they all put in 10,000 hours. What was the difference? The prevailing thought at that time was that what mattered, what would count the most would be like tournament play. So going to tournaments, playing, being under pressure, right? Being on the clock, that kind of stuff. But what they found is the people that elevated their skills to be grandmasters, they studied the games of other grandmasters and then tried to reproduce them. And when they made a mistake, they would go back, look at what they were supposed to have done, and fix that error and move forward. And so it was the type of practice, and in chess it was that study of games of grandmasters, not the amount of practice. So, any golfers? Golfers, okay. Malcolm Gladwell has a great podcast episode about golf, which is really funny. A good walk ruined, I think, is what it's called. And it has to do with the country clubs in LA and how they have basically manipulated the entire system so they pay like minuscule amounts of property tax in LA while everybody else pays like through the nose. So golf. If you want to learn how to play golf, there's like a process, and you could put tennis in here, you could put a lot of different things in this analogy, right? So you try it out, you embarrass yourself, you get a coach, and you learn, you get a lesson, right? And you learn some things, you go practice those things, you get a little bit better, you might have another lesson, so you go and you practice those new things, because the coach has seen that you've progressed, right? Eventually you get to a point where you feel pretty comfortable playing golf or tennis or whatever it is. And stuff starts to become automatic. You don't have to think about your foot positioning every time. You don't have to think about how you're holding the club every single time. You don't have to think about your backswing every single time. And it becomes automatic. You've learned how to golf, like congratulations, right? You could say piano. You learned how to play piano when you were 8 years old, right? And you learned the basics, and it became automatic. So I'm not learning golf. I'm learning how to skateboard. This is like super embarrassing. This is like literally like one of the first times I took the skateboard outside of my driveway. We got skateboards for the kids for Christmas, and we have this, the home we're in right now has like a big hallway of hardwood, and then it opens up into a big room. And the kids, like my kids are 2 and 4 and 8. And so they're just like all on their bellies on their skateboards, right? And they're just like going down the hallway. And I'm like, that kind of looks fun. I never skateboarded as a kid because I think my dad was worried I would like break my arm or something, and I was playing baseball, and also why I never skied. But I thought, so I did some research, found like I'm probably going to be better off on a longboard than like a skateboard, right? At my age, my declining flexibility. And so I found skateboards, and my plan was like to get a board that was blank and then paint it, because hey, I'm a designer. I want it to look the way I want it to look, right? And so I did this design. I didn't mention this before because I actually had a slide. It's funny, like I will go off on a tangent without noticing it, but then when I'm on the tangent, I notice it. I'm like, what are you doing again? I had a slide with like my previous like logos for my previous companies, but like it wasn't as impressive as other slides I've seen in my presentations. Like there was no Amazon, there was no Twitter. It was like Cerner, which is a software company out of Kansas City that does healthcare stuff. There was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is why I moved back here to kind of lead their mobile design, and then Tax Act right now, which is like helping people do their taxes online, which is super cool. So anyway, I worked at the church. I thought it would be really punk to put like a cool illustration of the angel Moroni on the bottom of my longboard. So I drew it and on my iPad, sent it off to this company that printed it for me, and that's what's on the bottom there. So anyway, back to the story. I'm learning to longboard, and it's fun because my whole family's learning together. Like we're all at the same pace. And so one day I'm out riding my longboard. No, never mind. I'm going to talk about that later. So this is me longboarding. This random church parking lot by our house, and we're there often. And we just kind of go around in circles. It's great because the littlest child, the 2-year-old, like we're kind of always close to her no matter where we are. If she's like on her board, like doing, it looks like she's like swimming out like on a surfboard, like to catch the wave. That's how she rides it. Okay, next slide. That's enough of that. So what happens when you reach that level of automaticity, like stuff being automatic for you, is your improvement stalls. You're no longer pushing yourself. You're just doing it for fun, right? Like for me, longboarding, like I just go out and like, if I don't fall down, I'm having a good time, right? I'm not going super fast, but whatever. Like I'm an old man that just learned how to longboard. And the assumption is that if you go out, you learn how to golf, and then you just go golf like once a week, and you're hitting you're on the driving range and stuff, you're going to get better. That's wrong, because you're not pushing yourself. That practice, so to speak, isn't helping you. And so the assumption we make is that a doctor that has been practicing for 20 years is better than a doctor that's been practicing for 5 years. We assume that a teacher that's been teaching for 20 years is better than a teacher that's been teaching for 5 years. Because we assume that she learned how to teach. Do you see what I did there? He or she learned how to teach. and then has taught for 20 years. And so naturally they're going to get better, right? But what studies have found is that those sort of activities that become automatic and second nature to us deteriorate over time if we're not constantly looking to improve. So let's look at this for a second. I tried to kind of think of like a normal day, not a normal day, kind of a normal day that I would really abhor in work. But this happens a lot, and I'm pretty sure you have these kind of schedules a lot yourselves. Okay, so you start off with a meeting. Then you might have like the meeting that happens after the meeting with somebody that didn't like get said what they wanted to say, and they pull you aside, and it's like 15 to 30 minutes later, right? And so then the hour that you had between meetings turns into half an hour or 20 minutes, which is just enough time to get back to your desk, open up Slack or Sketch, and then get the little notification again that you have another meeting in 15 minutes. At that point, if you're like me, your head goes like, okay, well, I can't really get into this now, so I'm just gonna check Twitter, right? So, so you have another meeting, and then you have lunch. So far, you've like done nothing today. You have another meeting after lunch. You have some design time, but that's interrupted by somebody that's ranting about like their first world problems, right? Just random like office talk. You get invited to a last-minute 4:30 meeting, which like takes up the rest of your day, and by the time you go home, you're like, I thought today was going to be productive, and it wasn't. You didn't do anything, right? Like, this is at least like 40% of my days at work. So how in the world can I assume that just going to work and working hard, I'm going to get any better at what I'm trying to do, at what I'm trying to be? Unless I'm trying to be really good at participating in meetings, and when I'm going to those meetings, I'm consciously thinking about being better at participating in meetings. Like I'm not improving. I'm not becoming what I want to be. And so, if you just show up and do the work, even if you're working hard, you're going to hit a wall. You're going to hit a plateau. Every job that doesn't have these kind of natural, deliberate practice, like principles built into it, think like figure skaters, violinists, stuff like that, where there's like clear objective goals to be met, and everybody knows what needs to be done to get there, and so it's a matter of like doing that work to get to that level, which is like almost everything that normal people do, right? Like your hobbies, our job for sure falls into that category. We're gonna hit this wall, and it's because there's not a clear training philosophy for us to follow. If you're not feeling uncomfortable, then you're probably stuck. You're probably at that level of acceptable. What was the term? Acceptable. Not achievement. Anyway, it's like acceptable level of performance. You're probably stuck there if you're not feeling uncomfortable in what you're doing. So how do we break through those plateaus? We need to get out of that comfort zone. We need to, and when we push ourselves out of a comfort zone, weaknesses are going to become more apparent, right? Think of a tennis player. Tennis player learns how to play tennis, is going out playing tennis with their friends every weekend, and gets to the point where it's automatic. Like they don't have to think about, you know, their foot positioning or their swinging. I'm not a tennis player, you guys. And but every now and then their friend will hit a shot that they always miss, almost like it's automatic. Well, it's because like that's outside of their capabilities, right? And so if you're playing tennis, you go play somebody that's a little bit better than you, because they will expose those weaknesses, right? If you're playing guitar, you play that riff a little bit faster than you're comfortable playing. It will expose those weaknesses, okay? So you identify the weaknesses, you make a plan on how you can improve those things, and then you go and you practice concentrating on that plan and those weaknesses and what you're specifically doing to improve those things. Okay, I told you I was getting ahead of myself. Here's the rest of that longboard story, okay? So I'm still learning, you guys. If I thought really hard, I could probably tell you each instance I've been on the longboard, right? Like that's how new I am. But so this one day, Saturday morning, I'm like, oh, I should go exercise. I should take this down to the trail, take my board down the trail and like ride. That'd be fun. And so I'm riding back and forth on this little like stretch of trail where there's no like big hills because like I don't have a helmet yet. And there's really not too many curves. Like it was pretty simple. So I'm going back and forth, and at the same time, I'm kind of putting this stuff together and reading these books, 2 books, Peak that I already mentioned, and then So Good They Can't Ignore You is another one that talks about this, but it's really just like a small section of it, but you can see how that author uses it to expand into like finding a job that's really fulfilling. So anyway, and that stuff is kind of in my head while I'm skateboarding, and I think, oh, because ever since I started, I had trouble like pushing. Like there was one little like blip in my video where I'd pushed, I was like, oh, because like I hadn't got that balance yet. And so as I'm going down this trail, this little parkway, I'm like, oh, I have a weakness. I don't know how to push, which basically means like I can't stand on one leg and skateboard for very long. Like it's like 1, 2, whoa, like you gotta get it back on, right? And so I thought, okay, let me do this. Let me, there was like a distinct end and starting point for me, and I thought, hey, let's time myself. Let's see if I can go faster from there to there, right? So I got my phone out, turned on the timer, and I also timed how many times I lost my balance, right? And I was also keeping track of how many consecutive pushes I did, right? It sounds super stupid. Like if anybody out there's like been doing skateboarding for a long time, like take pity on me. Like I'm not good. But these things were like weaknesses that I identified. And so I did that kind of run 3 times. And when I started, I was literally like 4 or 5 pushes before I started to feel like I was going to lose my balance, and I had to hurry and get my balance again with both feet on the board. That turned to 6, and then I got 6. I was like, okay, I bet I can do 7. Like, let's try to do 7. And it wasn't like I was like, 7, okay, done. Like, it was 7. It was like I was getting to 6. I was like, oh crap, get that last one in. Did 7. By the time I was done, and this is just like 15 minutes, I did like 16. And I was like super impressed with myself because I did 16, and my times were getting faster, like from like 5 minutes and 30 seconds to 5 minutes and 25 seconds to 5 minutes and 10 seconds. Makes sense because I was pushing more, so I was able to get some more speed, and I think I only fell off once on each run. So anyway, the point is I was like keeping track of that stuff, identified weaknesses, and then kind of went through that process of thinking of ways that I could improve it, right? Like, hey, I can't really balance on one foot and do this longboard thing. Oh, maybe if I just practice that thing, you know? And so anyway, so I had to do this. So purposeful practice is basically what I did. Purposeful practice means like you have well-defined like specific goals. You focus on those goals when you practice. So like when I said the meeting thing, right, earlier, it's not really purposeful practice just going to meetings. You have to go to meetings understanding. This is assuming you really want to be good at like participating in meetings, right? That's the thing that you've decided is your goal. You go to meetings and you focus on being good at participating in meetings based on what you know, the mechanism you've decided to choose. It involves feedback. Now the feedback I got longboarding was my own feedback. Sorry, I keep like tapping this. It was my own feedback, right? Now if you had a coach, your coach can give you feedback, right? But you need feedback. Feedback is involved in purposeful practice, and it gets you out of your comfort zone. I thought I was going to fall a lot. I ended up not falling, and I was able to kind of consistently increase the number of pushes I could do consecutively. Now, deliberate practice is a little bit different in that it's informed practice. And so I mentioned a little bit earlier about how deliberate practice usually has like a coach or a mentor and like a well-established like training routine for that like discipline. And so for that reason, for like the strictest definition of deliberate practice, we can't really do that. Like according to the researchers, right? The guy that came up with the term deliberate practice would say, well, you can't do that in experience design or in development because Like there's no like established training philosophy, okay? But we can still use those things in our own work. We can take principles. We can steal principles from that. Like as a designer, I steal from people all the time, right? You look at something, you're like, that's really cool. I could use that in my stuff, right? And you tweak it and whatever. Like Pablo Picasso, right? Like great artists they don't copy, they steal. Isn't that what they said? Okay, we'll pretend that's what he said. Okay. This quote, it's kind of long, I'm just going to read it, but kind of speaks to the idea that it's not easy, it's not fun, right? You think about skateboarding. That example I shared you with skateboarding, I did that once because it wasn't fun. The next time I went, I just was like back and forth, like music, had my headphones, I was just enjoying the ride. Because doing it and keeping track and counting and timing, like that took work and it was effort. Doing things we know how to do well is enjoyable. That's true. And that's exactly the opposite of what deliberate practice demands. Deliberate practice is above all an effort of focus and concentration. That's what makes it deliberate. That's distinct from the mindless playing of scales or hitting of tennis balls that most people engage in. Okay? And I'm sure like you all have examples in your lives that you can think of and be like, oh yeah, like I do that totally because it's fun. But like I learned, I had piano lessons when I was little. I am no better today than I was when I was like 16 because I stopped improving and just kind of playing the same stuff I always played. Okay. So how can we use deliberate practice to, let me just see if I can get this resynced. Okay, good. Okay, we talked about this during the break. Like we might not be able to use deliberate practice per se, like as strictly defined in the literature, but we can steal principles from deliberate practice that can help us kind of stay at that edge of our comfort zone and improve. So, step one is focus. There's 3 F's, okay? Focus, feedback, fix it. Okay? Stole that from the book. It's straight out of the book. So if you read it, you'll find it, you'll be like, plagiarizer. Is that even the right term? I'm not sure. So you want to decide on what your definition of success looks like, right? What do you want to be? What does it mean to you to be a great designer, to be a great full stack developer? Whatever that is, you need to kind of define that in your own mind what that is. So that's your goal. And then you need to look and see what are the gaps? Where am I lacking? What skills or knowledge am I lacking to be that thing, that goal, to become that? And then you make a plan to improve those weaknesses. And you practice focusing on that plan. Okay? So that's the process. And while you're practicing, stuff is going to happen. And that's where feedback comes in, okay? We need to learn to embrace honest feedback for our stuff. If it's honest feedback, no matter if it completely like tears up everything we thought was good about what we did, which like to be honest as a designer, they're really just ahead of the curve. Because if I were to look at the same work 2 years from now, I'd probably say the exact same thing, right? Maybe even a year. Like you go back and look at your stuff a year ago and you're like, God, that was garbage. My boss was totally right, right? So you need the feedback because that helps you identify where to focus next, okay? So feedback is crucial to this idea of purposefully practicing. And then the last is fix it. So based on that feedback, you make another plan and then you go to work and you fix that plan, okay? Let's talk about kind of, this was a weird slide, I didn't know where to fit this in. But this is kind of, I thought it was important because it helps you when you're making a plan. Like you need simple tasks, but they have to be meaningful too, okay? So if your goal is to strengthen your upper body or whatever push-ups do, like, is it better to do 10 push-ups a day or is it better to read a fitness magazine every day, right? Like they're both simple things to do. One of them is going to be more meaningful for your goal, right? Writing jokes. Has anyone heard the Seinfeld strategy, the Seinfeld story strategy? So the story goes like this. There was an aspiring comic. He goes to a club. Seinfeld's there. And he gets like a one-on-one with Seinfeld and said, so how can I be better? And Seinfeld basically says, well, the key to telling better jokes is writing better jokes, right? You need to create better jokes, basically. He says you need better jokes to be a better comedian. And the key to that is writing better. If you can write better, then you'll be able to do better jokes. And he says, so this is what you do. You go get a big wall calendar, like one of those big calendars that will fit on your wall, that shows the whole year. You get a big red marker. And every day you write jokes. And when you write jokes that day, you make an X on that calendar for that day. And the next day you write more jokes. You make an X, right? And so this is is it better to write jokes or research jokes? Well, Seinfeld, who would be classified as an expert in that field, is saying you need to write better. And he says, here's the deal. You're going to like seeing that chain, right? You're going to like seeing those red X's. And then you have one job, and that's not break the chain. Don't break that chain. Okay, so that's the advice he gave. And so little by little, that person, assuming he followed through, was writing every day and marking off and kind of not breaking that chain. Okay, so we don't have like teachers. There's not like UX coaches out there. Maybe there are. Are there? Ben would know. No? You like UX coaches. Like, if we go hire a UX coach?
Maybe. There might be a few out there.
There's probably, I bet.
I could be a UX coach.
Yeah, Ben is a UX coach. So what if you can't find a mentor? Like, what if you can't find somebody that you identify? Like, say you want to be somebody that's like amazing at, I don't know, baking pies. And you can't find an expert pie baker to kind of teach you and mentor you and feed you those exercises that you need to be able to get better. Well, then, like, you kind of need to do it on your own. I read this story about Ben Franklin, and I love this story. Ben Franklin wanted to be a good writer, and he felt like there was a publication at the time called The Spectator, and The Spectator, he loved the writing in this publication. And he just thought the writers were so clever and so good at what they did, and he aspired to be like that. And so Ben Franklin went about trying to get better to do that. And what he did is he'd like read an article, and then he'd go away for a bit, come back, and he'd try to rewrite the article, right, from memory, basically. He'd try to rewrite it and try to kind of grasp the same like level of expertise that he read, that he felt from those articles. And what happened was he quickly learned that his vocabulary wasn't good enough. Now, it wasn't that he didn't understand the words, because he understood the words when he read them, but he didn't have those words at his fingertips when he was writing. He didn't have those words internalized enough so that he could use them while he was writing, right? And so what did he do? Well, he modified his practice. Instead of just reading it and then coming back later and writing it, he thought poetry would be a good vehicle for him to try new words. So he would read an article, he would rewrite the article as poetry, because that would force him to use words that would fit the rhyme and rhythm of the poem. His hypothesis was, if I do this, I'm using words that I'm not used to using because they fit, right? And then later he would come back, he'd look at the poetry, and he would write it again as prose. So he'd convert it again. And then he started to notice like an improvement. And then he modified again and said, well, now I need to work on the structure of my writing. So instead of like writing out hints for myself like of this article, I'm going to write out hints on separate pieces of paper, and I'm going to jumble them all up. So he's got all of these thoughts and ideas that are expressed in his exemplar. And then, excuse me. Oh yeah, let's gunk up the throat more. He would, instead of, so we had all these jumbled ideas, And so his task was to unjumble those and put them in an order that made sense, so that he could work on the structure. So, long story a little bit shorter, he said that he started to see an improvement in his writing, and now us looking back can see him as one of the best like American writers. Like he wrote never mind, I can't think of the books he wrote, but he was an amazing writer. Poor Richard's Almanac, that was it. And he did this through, he intuitively kind of knew about these deliberate practice or these purposeful practice ideas. But the point for us is that when we don't have a teacher, we need to manufacture those opportunities. Okay, we need to kind of come up with them on our own, like Ben Franklin did, because there's not an established way to do it. And that goes for our jobs, our hobbies, whatever it is we're trying to improve at. But here's the great thing, like we have the internet. Ben Franklin didn't have the internet. That's why he sucked at chess. Like he literally, that's like one of the things like he most regretted, is that he couldn't ever get better at chess. Well, now we know why. Because he was never, like he didn't have access to those grandmaster games, so he couldn't study those. But we have the internet. Like, can you imagine how amazing Ben Franklin would be if he lived like now in the internet? And here's a great example. That's horrible. Okay, Dan Petty on Twitter and YouTube. He kind of did this, he ran this like contest and basically put out a creative brief and said, hey, Spaced, I just invented this company. Our goal is to get to space safely, get to space and back again safely. And so I want a logo, I want a website, I want an app. Go. And winner gets a MacBook, right? And so hundreds, maybe thousands of people took the time to practice their craft, took this opportunity to practice their craft, and did it start working or did it just stop? No. Okay, so I took this from Dribble. I just searched for Spaced Challenge on Dribble, and there were hundreds of just examples that people posted on Dribble of websites and logos and stuff. They practiced. And the reason they did that is because one guy said, hey, wouldn't this be fun? Let's all practice together. And they got feedback. They actually took the time and gave these designers feedback. So I just thought that was a good example. Here's an example that I thought was going to be good. I'm not sure it's so good. Like after actually, when I started the presentation, let me put it this way. When I started thinking about this presentation, I thought this was going to be a great example. Now, at the end of it, I think this is like, don't do this. Like we can do better than this. So last fall, I had this idea like, hey, I want to get better at using Framer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find like examples of interactions in apps that I like, and I'm going to reproduce them in Framer. So I'm basically going to copy them, but like try to get the interactions just right, so that when I have to do something for work, I've learned all these basics and all these techniques that I can do it faster. Okay? I want to do 100 of these. Like I'm on 22 now. It's not easy, especially after I got past the first few. And that's the problem, because I'm not like pushing through those barriers, right? I've kind of reached this level of acceptable performance in Framer where I'm better than probably most people, but I've kind of plateaued, right? And like it's just a pain, because here's the other thing, I wanted to get better at writing too, and so every time I would post a Medium article about the experience that I had doing it, and that's the part that like is really draining, because like you do the whole prototype and you get everything figured out, and then you have to go write about the stupid thing, right? So I'm on 22, I'm kind of stuck, and that's kind of the deal. Like it's not fun, it's going to be hard, and when you get stuck, we need to like figure out how to get unstuck, right? We need to break through those barriers so that we're continuously improving, okay? A designer that has been working for 10 years isn't better than a designer that's been working for 2 just because of that time gap, right? We need to always be improving so that time gap actually means something. so that during those extra 8 years, that designer has been continuously improving, they will be better. And so I hope that I hope you got something out of this today. And I hope that you can figure out where those points of weakness are in your own work, or your personal life, or your hobbies, and go to work like purposefully practicing to improve them. So thanks. Now, this was actually practice for me, okay? Because I want to present more, and so I thought, hey, let me call up Ben and see if they'll let me like come and present while I'm on vacation. And so, if you would be so kind, and we could try this, and if not, then I'll post the link on the meetup group. But like this QR code goes to like a 4-question survey about my presentation. It's basically like, hey, on a scale of like this was torturous or very enjoyable, like how much did you enjoy it? Mike, is it working? Okay. So I'll post the link later, but I would really appreciate your feedback on this so that I can figure out where I can improve so that I can get better. And the next people that hear a presentation, maybe this one, will enjoy it more. Okay, thank you.